Ever get that sinking feeling? You know when you should push back, but the person telling you what to do just has that air of authority.
Oh, yeah.
Like that time my boss made everyone stay late to redo a presentation that was already fine.
Ugh, I've been there.
We all obey authority figures every day, but why? What makes us follow orders, even ones we might disagree with?
That's a great question, yeah.
That's what we're diving into today.
Awesome.
We're going to unpack the psychology of obedience using the Simply Psychology article, Obedience to Authority in Psychology.
Okay.
Have you had a chance to check that out?
Oh, yeah, I took a look.
Cool.
It's a fascinating topic.
It is. It is.
What I think is really interesting is that obedience isn't just about doing what you're told.
Okay.
You know, the article defines it as acting in response to a direct order, usually from an authority figure.
Right.
Where you wouldn't have done that thing otherwise.
Oh, so it's like...
It's about that extra pressure that comes from someone being in charge.
Gotcha. That distinction is important. And, you know, this topic took on a whole new level of urgency after World War II.
Oh, absolutely.
How could the atrocities of the Holocaust have happened?
Mm-hmm.
Were the people involved inherently different?
Yeah.
Was there like something specific about German culture that led to this?
Right. That was the big question, right? Are Germans different?
Yeah.
And that's where Stanley Milgram comes in.
Okay.
A psychologist who really wanted to put this theory to the test.
Interesting.
His experiment is one of the most famous and controversial in psychology history.
Yeah, let's break down the Milgram experiment.
Okay, yeah.
So participants thought they were delivering electric shocks to another person whenever they answered a question incorrectly.
Oh, like
a word pair or something.
Yeah, okay.
The shocks, of course, weren't real.
Right.
The person being shocked was an actor.
Right.
But our participants didn't know that.
Wow.
And the results, they were shocking.
I bet.
The majority of people kept administering what they thought were increasingly painful shocks.
Oh my God.
Simply because the experimenter, the authority figure, instructed them to continue.
It's wild, right?
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So what did this tell us about are Germans different question?
Well, Milgram's findings implied that anyone under the right circumstances could be capable of acts
Wow.
they'd normally consider unthinkable when following orders.
Really?
Yeah, it wasn't about nationality. It was about the power of the situation.
That's a really unsettling thought, and it makes you think about someone like Adolf Eichmann, who played a key role in orchestrating the logistics of the Holocaust.
Right, right.
And in his jail diary, he wrote, "The orders were for me, the highest thing in my life, and I had to obey them without question."
Ooh, chills.
Chills, right?
Yeah.
To him, it wasn't about personal responsibility. It was just following orders.
Right.
But was he truly a monster or a product of a system that demanded obedience?
That's where it gets even more complicated. See, Eichmann was declared sane by psychiatrists.
Oh, wow.
He had a family, considered himself normal, and claimed he felt no personal hatred toward those he helped exterminate.
So was this just blind obedience or something else?
Yeah, it's really hard to say for sure.
So we're constantly facing these situations that just demand obedience.
That's right.
But how do we know when it's okay to just follow along
Yeah.
and when we should maybe push back a little?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And there's really no easy answer.
Right.
But understanding those psychological mechanisms at play,
Yeah.
that's a really great starting point.
Okay.
You know, remember Milgram's experiment?
Yeah.
People were way more likely to obey when they saw that authority figure as legitimate
Okay.
and when they believed they weren't responsible for the consequences of their actions.
It's like that just following orders mentality where they can absolve themselves of any guilt because they're not the ones calling the shots.
Exactly. It's called diffusion of responsibility.
Wow.
And it's a powerful, powerful force.
Wow.
But the flip side is also true.
Okay.
If someone believes they will be held accountable,
Yeah.
they're much less likely to obey blindly.
So transparency and accountability, super important in any authority system.
Absolutely, yeah. And on an individual level, it's about cultivating those critical thinking skills
Right.
and having that courage to question orders, especially when those orders feel morally wrong.
You know, it's funny. I'm way more likely to question a request from a coworker than from my boss, even if the request itself is identical.
That perfectly illustrates how deeply ingrained these obedience patterns are.
Yeah.
We automatically assign these authority levels to people based on their roles
Right.
and our own social conditioning.
Yeah.
We see a uniform, a title, a position of power, and our brains, they're just primed to obey.
So just being aware of that tendency can help us make more conscious choices.
Right.
I was like, mental pause button. Before we go into autopilot obedience mode.
Exactly. So if you know you're more susceptible to obeying someone in a uniform, for instance,
Yeah.
you can consciously recognize that.
Okay.
And then ask yourself, am I obeying because this is the right thing to do? Or am I just reacting to that authority symbol?
That's a good point. But what about situations where there are serious consequences for disobeying?
Right.
Like refusing your boss's direct order could get you fired.
Sure.
Real life isn't always so clear cut.
You're right. It's a balancing act, weighing those potential consequences of obedience versus disobedience.
Yeah.
And sometimes that right choice,
Yeah.
it's murky.
It is.
You can't always fight every battle.
It's like that saying, pick your battles.
Exactly.
So sometimes strategic compliance is the best we can do.
Sometimes it is. But even then, you're doing it consciously, not just blindly following along.
This makes me think about all those times I just went along with things at work, even when I had doubts.
Yeah.
Maybe I was afraid to speak up, didn't want to rock the boat. Looking back, I wonder what would have happened if I had voiced my concerns.
It's a common experience.
Yeah.
And often, those doubts,
Yeah.
they are worth exploring.
Oh.
Speaking up could lead to positive change, or at least a deeper understanding of the reasons behind a decision.
So a takeaway for our listeners,
Yeah.
don't be afraid to ask questions.
Please.
Challenge authority, even when it feels a little uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Blind obedience can be dangerous, both personally and societally.
Wow.
It's up to each of us to cultivate that critical awareness
Okay.
and find the courage to speak up when necessary.
This conversation has been so thought-provoking.
Good.
And the implications of this obedience thing go way beyond individual choices, don't they?
Absolutely.
We've seen how blind obedience to authority can have devastating consequences throughout history.
You're hitting on a critical point. Understanding the psychology of obedience is crucial for creating a more just and ethical society.
Okay.
If we can grasp what makes people obey, even against their values,
Yes.
then we can start to build safeguards against misses of power.
So it's not just about personal choices.
No.
It's about creating systems that encourage responsible leadership
Yeah.
and empower individuals to speak up against injustice.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that blind obedience isn't a virtue, it's a potential danger.
Wow.
We need to foster a culture of critical thinking
Right.
and ethical decision-making at every level of society.
And that brings us back to the chilling example of Adolf Eichmann in the Holocaust. If someone considered normal could participate in such atrocities simply by following orders.
It forces us to confront a deeply unsettling question. What does that say about the potential for darkness within ourselves?
Oh, wow.
And more importantly,
How do we ensure we don't fall victim to that? I mean, knowing this can happen to anyone, it's terrifying.
it's a challenge, right?
Yeah.
There's no easy answer, no magic formula.
Right.
But one thing I think is really crucial is acknowledging that we're all susceptible to these influences.
Oh, okay.
None of us are immune to the pressure of authority
Right.
and understanding our own vulnerability.
Yeah.
That's the first step towards resisting it when we need to.
So it's about recognizing that we have those blind spots.
Yeah.
And being willing to really examine our own motivations and behaviors.
Absolutely.
That's tough.
It is tough, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
And, we also need to create space for open dialogue
Oh.
where we can question authority without fear.
Okay.
Think about workplaces where people are afraid to speak up,
Yeah.
even if they have serious concerns.
Right.
That can be a breeding ground for blind obedience.
That makes me think about the importance of a strong support system.
Oh, absolutely.
Having people you trust
Yeah.
to challenge your thinking
Yes.
and call you out when you might be slipping into that blind obedience.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
Having diverse perspectives around you, it's crucial. It's much harder to just blindly follow orders.
Yeah.
When you have people asking you tough questions,
Right.
encouraging you to think critically.
This deep dive has been eye-opening.
Good.
I feel like I've learned so much about this whole psychology of obedience thing
Yeah.
and how it impacts our lives in ways we don't even realize.
Right. It's everywhere.
It is?
It really is woven into the fabric of our lives.
Wow.
It's a topic that we need to keep reflecting on, keep paying attention to.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful reminder that we all have a responsibility to be aware,
Okay.
to make conscious choices about when to obey,
Yeah.
when to question, and when to resist.
For everyone listening, here's a final thought.
Okay.
What are the situations in your life where obedience is expected?
Ooh, that's a good one.
And are those situations where obedience is truly justified?
It's something we all need to ask ourselves.
It is.
Take some time.
Yeah.
Examine your own experiences with authority.
Okay.
Think about those times when you obeyed without question, and what factors made you more or less likely to comply.
I hope this deep dive will inspire you to speak up a little more, to question a little more, and to resist blind obedience whenever you can.
Because ultimately, that power to choose how we respond,
Right.
it lies within each of us.
And that's a power worth protecting.
Absolutely.